I mentioned in a previous video about Donald Trump's speech this morning before the United Nations General Assembly that Fox News was visibly desperate to try to cover and compensate for Trump's disastrous speech. And if anybody has any doubts about that, look no further than this.
President Trump has been speaking at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. He unfurled raw truth to countries in attendance there and to the rest of the world. And moments from now, the president is set to hold a meeting with the UN Secretary General. And that meeting will follow that long speech that put quite the spotlight on the different world order we are living in now. He even called the former President Joe Biden by name, comparing where the world was under Biden and while Biden was leading the United States and where we are now. The president talked in detail about his own foreign policy victories, the successful containment of illegal immigration into the United States. And he had a warning, too, for other countries with all those open borders. And, of course, he talked about the ongoing wars with Israel versus Hamas and Ukraine versus Russia. I'm Harris Faulkner.
Yes, you are. And you are the most blatant propagandist I have seen in a long time. He unfurled raw truth and talked about how friggin' amazing he is. We're going to talk about some of the fact checks there because, of course, he lied his ass off, as you noticed in our coverage of that speech. But Daniel Dale of CNN has even more professional fact checking. We'll take a look at that. But listen, it wasn't just Fox News hosts. It was also Republican politicians on Fox News also trying to cover and compensate for Trump's terrible speech and really emphasizing how truthful he was. Here is Republican Majority Leader in the Senate, John Thune.
So first off, what are your thoughts on what you've heard from President Trump at the UN so far today?
Well, thanks, Sandra. Obviously, straight talk from the president. He puts out the unvarnished truth. And I think the thing that he makes clear in all his discussions that relate to foreign policy, national security, is that he's restoring peace through strength. And the president knows full well that it is not our strength that tempts our adversaries, it's our weakness. And he projects strength in everything that he does, and this speech at the UN was no exception to that. And he calls out things that I think he believes other countries are doing wrong. And in many cases, this open borders that we had here in the United States that he's put an end to is something that's afflicting Europe and other countries around the world. So
you notice how it was almost word for word verbatim between Harris Faulkner and John Thune. It's almost like Republican politicians and MAGA Fox News hosts share the same script. Interesting. So I want to play a couple more clips from Trump's speech that we didn't get a chance to get to in the last video because otherwise it would have gone on for like 40 minutes. I have 3 more. And then we're going to get into some of the more professional fact-checking from CNN's Daniel Dale because, again, of course, despite what John Thune and Harris Faulkner want you to believe, Trump was full of shit, no matter how desperately Fox wants you to believe otherwise.
A year from now. But they've come way down over the last year. As a result, every air conditioner is like very uncommon to see one in some of these countries because the electric costs are so high. So while the U.S. has approximately 1,300 heat-related deaths annually, that's a lot, Europe loses more than 175,000 people to heat deaths each year because the costs are so expensive you can't turn on an air conditioner. What is that all about? That's not Europe. That's not the Europe that I love and know. All in the name of pretending to stop the global warming hoax.
Interesting. Again, we'll get to that. I will remind you that electricity and energy costs on Donald Trump's watch are surging, not declining. He's just lying his ass off. But while that was an interesting remark made about air conditioners and 175,000 heat-related deaths in Europe, he then turns his focus to Brazil. Now, for context, I want to remind you, Brazil had their own version of Donald Trump, Jair Bolsonaro. They actually called him that one of his nicknames was the Trump of the Tropics. He was a right-wing populist and demagogue who also faced re-election and lost. And like Trump, he refused to formally concede the election. Unlike Trump, he, at least publicly, authorized his chief of staff to begin the transition process. Trump tried to delay that here. You remember the January 6th insurrection, 2021, here in the United States? Well, on January 8th, 2023, Bolsonaro supporters stormed the Brazilian capital, very similar to January 6th, 2 years and 2 days later. Now, this was after the victorious Lula da Silva was inaugurated. This was after he was inaugurated. So this wasn't so much to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, but it was an insurrection nonetheless. Bolsonaro, who again is a staunch Trump ally, they're very similar, and Bolsonaro and Trump are very fond of each other. Bolsonaro was investigated, prosecuted, and just recently found guilty of trying to stage a coup. So he was actually successfully prosecuted because Brazil's justice system took this shit much more seriously than ours did. So with all that in mind, I want you to hear what Donald Trump has to say in these next two clips about Brazil.
Is sustainable into the future. We're also using tariffs to defend our sovereignty and security throughout the world, including against nations that have taken advantage of former U.S. administrations for decades, including the most corrupt, incompetent administration in history, the sleepy Joe Biden administration. Brazil now faces major tariffs in response to its unprecedented efforts to interfere in the rights and freedoms of our American citizens and others, with censorship, repression, weaponization, judicial corruption, and targeting of political critics in the United States. I have a little problem saying this because I must tell you, I was walking in and the leader of Brazil was walking out. We saw him and I saw him, he saw me, and we embraced. And then I'm saying, can you believe I'm going to be saying this in just 2 minutes?
That was Lula right there. That's Lula right there at the end, holding a the guy, sitting in front of the guy with his finger raised, the one with the green and yellow tie.
But we actually agreed that we would meet next week. We didn't have much time to talk, like about 20 seconds. They were in retrospect, I'm glad I waited because this thing didn't work out too well. But we did talk, we had a good talk, and we agreed to meet next week, if that's of interest. But he seemed like a very nice man, actually. He liked me, I liked him. But if you, and I only do business with people.
So this is what's funny. He's upset and has been upset that Bolsonaro has been prosecuted. And so he has been complaining nonstop about the Brazilian government. Well, it's because they hold their authoritarian wannabe dictators accountable. And we'll see what happens with Lula. He is criticized Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, in a recent interview, Lula said if Trump did what he did in America, in Brazil, he would have been prosecuted and found guilty already, which pretty bold words. So we'll see what happens if they end up meeting. One more clip, short, much shorter, Trump's remarks on Brazil.
And so I'm very sorry to say this, that Brazil is doing poorly and will continue to do poorly. They can only do well when they're working with us. Without us, they will fail, just as others have failed.
Did he knock something over? Look at that one more time.
Doing poorly and will continue to do poorly. They can only do.
It's like the damn podium nearly knocked over. You see, oh shit. Okay. Now, with all that in mind, again, we've established how desperate Fox was to clean all this up for Trump. Let's get into some of the more professional fact checks from Daniel Dale of CNN. He has a laundry list.
There are a lot of issues there. So first of all, some of the conflicts he's counting as wars he resolved were not actually wars at all. For example, Egypt and Ethiopia have argued over an Ethiopian dam project on the Blue Nile, but they were not in a raging war in which thousands of people were being killed. Similarly, Trump has claimed that he prevented conflict between Serbia and Kosovo from resuming, but they were not in a raging war either. In addition, the conflict involving the Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Rwanda has not actually been resolved. We have good reporting from just a day ago talking about how hostilities have continued despite the peace deal that was signed under President Trump. And then in addition to that, India denies that President Trump was responsible for mediating its ceasefire, its truce with neighboring Pakistan. So a whole lot of issues with just that one claim. And Pamela, there were a whole bunch of other claims that were just out and out false. So I don't even have time to run through all of them. But on inflation, President Trump said that grocery prices are down during his presidency. They're up, and the pace of the increases is accelerating as the tariffs take effect. He has claimed that inflation has been defeated in general. No, inflation is also accelerating. It was 2.9% last month, up from 2.7%. He said that European electricity bills are high, which is true, but that ours are coming way down. No, in the U.S., they are increasing sharply, up 6.2% in August compared to a year prior. And there were a whole bunch of other topics. He claimed that he has secured $17 trillion in investment in the U.S. Well, just yesterday, his own White House press secretary said it was about $9 trillion in investment. So I don't know where the additional $8 trillion in a day has come from. And even that initial $9 trillion the press secretary claimed is highly dubious, counting a whole bunch of things that aren't actually spending, but rather are vague commitments from various countries. You and Kylie addressed the environmental claims. I just want to address one more. He claimed that China builds a lot of wind turbines and manufactures them for others, but refuses to use it itself, barely uses wind power. In fact, China is the world leader in the use of wind power. It is building additional wind power in China far faster than the pace at which the U.S. is building in the United States itself. So the idea that China is just, foisting this terrible source of energy on other countries while refusing to use it is a reversal of reality.
A reversal of reality. That's Donald Trump's reality in a nutshell. It really is. So he lied his ass off. He humiliated himself on the global stage. And Fox News, in so many ways, is visibly desperate to try to cover and compensate for it with some fluff pieces and massages after the fact. Like, they were laying it on pretty thick. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.